When Michael Turner first heard about the abandoned maternity hospital, it was mentioned almost as an afterthought in a conversation he had with a local archivist in the city library. The man, a pale, elderly fellow with yellowed fingers from years of cigarette smoke, leaned across the desk and said, "You want a story no one dares to write? Go look at the old Ashford Maternity Hospital. It's been closed since the late 80s, but people still hear crying from there at night. Babies, mothers, screams." Michael laughed politely then, but the words clung to him. He was a freelance journalist, one of those restless seekers of forgotten truths. He had written pieces on derelict factories, on Cold War bunkers, on shuttered theaters haunted by whispers of their performers. But the idea of a maternity hospital left to rot, that unsettled him more than he cared to admit. The archivist's eyes had darkened. They said it shut down because of funding. That's what the paper said. But the truth? He lowered his voice to a rasp. Too many babies didn't leave alive. Too many mothers vanished in childbirth. People started to notice. And then, suddenly, one night, they closed the doors and locked it forever. Staff scattered. Records vanished. No one talks about it now. Michael left the library with the feeling that something had just hooked itself into his chest and was pulling him steadily toward the inevitable. Arrival, a building that still breathes. 2 weeks later, Michael found himself standing at the wrought iron gates of Ashford Maternity Hospital. It was late October, the air heavy with the earthy smell of wet leaves. The building loomed ahead like a giant brick carcass, its windows blackened, some cracked, others boarded. Ivy crawled across the facade like veins on a corpse. The gates were chained, but someone had cut through long ago. The padlock swung loosely as he stepped through. His flashlight trembled slightly in his grip. Inside, the reception hall yawned open, its high ceilings shedding paint in broad flakes. A wheelchair sat in the middle of the floor, tipped on its side as though abandoned mid-flight. The smell was of dust, mold, and something faintly coppery that seemed to seep from the very walls. Michael raised his camera, snapped a few photos. Each flash lit up fragments of the past. A faded sign pointing to "Delivery Ward," a corkboard still studded with rusted pins, a children's mural of smiling suns and cartoon animals smeared by water damage until they looked grotesque. He whispered aloud, though he didn't know why, "Christ, you can still feel it." The building was not dead, it was sleeping. He moved cautiously down the hallway. The floor tiles were cracked, weeds forcing their way through the gaps. His light glided across doors half open, revealing patient rooms stripped bare. Rusted bed frames, mold-blackened mattresses, IV poles bent at impossible angles. Then he found the nursery. It was a long, glass-walled room, most of the windows shattered. Inside stood several tiny cribs, their paint chipped, metal warped with age. A single stuffed rabbit, its fur matted with mildew, slumped in the nearest crib. Michael's throat tightened unexpectedly. He could almost picture rows of newborns here, crying, reaching, alive. And then, the silence pressed too heavily. That was when he heard it. A sound so faint he thought at first it was in his imagination. A baby's cry. Muffled, distant, but undeniably real. Michael froze. His rational brain kicked in. Maybe it was a stray cat, maybe a trick of wind through broken pipes. But the sound came again, longer, more desperate, echoing through the corridor. He swallowed hard. Just the building, old pipes, nothing more. But he didn't believe himself. On the second floor, Michael stumbled upon what had once been an administrative office. Filing cabinets lined the walls, their drawers half open, papers strewn across the floor like fallen leaves. Most were water-damaged beyond recognition. But in one cabinet, shoved into the back, he found a bundle of patient charts, still legible. He sat on the dusty floor and began to read. Patient, Margaret Lewis, age 27. Complications, severe bleeding during delivery. Infant, stillborn. Outcome, patient transferred. But there was no record of where she had been transferred. Another file. Patient, Elise Monroe, age 31. Notes: subject displays elevated anxiety. Infant removed from ward for observation. Mother claims she never saw child again. Discharged against medical advice. And another. Patient, unidentified, age approx 20. Notes: patient sedated during prolonged labor. Infant recorded as non-viable. Body not released to family. Record incomplete. Michael's hands trembled. These weren't routine medical tragedies. These were disappearances, lies, cover-ups. Then, tucked between the charts, he found a small cassette tape. The label, written in smudged ink, "Delivery Room, October 18th, 1987. He didn't have a player with him, but just holding it filled him with dread, as though the plastic shell radiated stored screams. Nightfall. He hadn't realized how long he'd spent exploring until he noticed the light through the broken windows was fading. The sun had gone, leaving only the weak blue wash of dusk. Michael moved quickly back toward the entrance, but when he reached the front doors, his chest tightened. The doors, which had been ajar when he entered, were now firmly shut. He yanked at them, locked, chained from the outside. "Hello?" His voice cracked. "Is someone there?" Only silence answered. Panic prickled his skin. He hadn't told anyone exactly where he was going. No one would be checking on him until tomorrow. And then, as though the hospital were mocking him, he heard it again. The crying. This time closer, louder, a newborn's wail reverberating through the halls. Michael turned, his flashlight beam quivering. "Hello? Is someone here?" The crying stopped instantly, as if silenced by an unseen hand. Drawn by something he couldn't explain, Michael followed the dim hallways to the old delivery ward. The swinging double doors creaked as he pushed them open. Inside, rows of beds lined the walls, curtains tattered, rust streaking every surface. In the far corner stood an operating table, leather straps still buckled to its sides. Above it, a surgical lamp haunted like a massive, unblinking eye. The smell here was stronger, rot mixed with disinfectant, like decay preserved in chemicals. On the floor, near the table, lay a nurse's uniform, stiff with age. A dark brown stain spread across the fabric. Michael felt dizzy, his vision blurred, the air thickening. And then, he heard voices. At first, just murmurs, then sharper. "Hold her down, she's losing too much blood. Doctor, the baby isn't breathing. Don't let her see it, take it away." Michael spun, but the room was empty. Empty except for the table, the straps, the ghost of screams hanging in the air. He stumbled backward, his breath ragged. In a small drawer of the nurse's station, he found a thin, leather-bound notebook. The ink had bled in places, but the words were still legible. October 2. Another one today. They told me not to ask questions, but how can I not? The mothers scream for their children. The doctors say the babies are deformed, unfit. They take them away, but no one tells us where. I hear crying at night when the halls are empty. The other nurses say it's just my imagination. Maybe he's right, but I can't sleep anymore. The crying never stops. The last entry was dated October 18th, the same as the cassette tape. October 18th. Something happened tonight. I can't write it down. God forgive us. I hear them in the walls. If anyone finds this, don't stay here. Don't listen to the cries. They're not what you think. Michael's stomach lurched. His hands shook so violently the notebook almost slipped from his grip. He should have stayed upstairs, should have found a way to break a window, to climb out, to escape. But some force, curiosity, fear, madness, drew him downward. The basement stairs were narrow, steep, slick with moisture. His flashlight bounced across peeling paint, exposed pipes, graffiti from vandals who had once dared to enter. At the bottom, the smell hit him, sour, putrid, like rotting meat hidden too long. The corridor opened into a wide storage room, and there, scattered across the floor, were cribs,
dozens of them, some overturned, some intact. Inside a few were bundles wrapped in filthy sheets. Michael's chest constricted as he raised the urge to vomit. The bundles were not whole. Some were skeletal, others strangely preserved, waxy. Faces frozen mid-scream, mouths gaping. And then, from the far corner of the basement came a sound that froze him to the marrow. Not a baby's cry this time, but a chorus, dozens of them, high-pitched, wailing in unison. The air grew frigid. His flashlight flickered. Shadows rippled along the walls, stretching, distorting into shapes of women clutching at their bellies, of infants crawling on broken limbs. Michael staggered back, choking on his breath. No, this isn't real. The shadows surged toward him, and among them,